Hey, welcome to the presentation to know how on the topic of deployment procedure of MySql, that is MDS at Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. Hi, I'm Satish Machandra Nagaraj. Let us discuss about the deployment procedure of MySql Managed Data Service at OCA. The agenda for this presentation is prior to MDS deployment, we have a certain prerequisite that we should configure the VCN and network configurations like subnets, dynamic route gateway, remote peering connections, route table, and what ingress rules need to be configured and what ports need to be opened under security list. So once prerequisites are done, then we can start deploying MDS. Then we will discuss about deployment procedure of a MySql client shell and MySql workbench. This is an architect data pipeline that managed data service is deployed in a private subnet under the VCN of Mumbai region. Since MDS resides on private subnet, we should have some client machine which resides in the same subnet, act as a jump server or a bastion service to access MDS. So our client local client can connect to the MDS via client VM. That's a client machine, which is a compute VM instance which is running on the same region on the same subnet. As a step one, first we should configure the VCN. The VCN can be configured either using a VCN wizard or manually step by step. We can create each network components like a public subnet, a private subnet, NAT gateway, and service gateway. The manual VCN configuration process, it's a bit tricky because we should follow the correct order of each network configuration. So rather than we can simply use the wizard to complete the visual VCN creation process. As a second is we need to configure subnets. Here we are using subnet IP start from 10.0.0 for public and 10.0.1 for private subnet. Then we should configure the dynamic routing gateway. We need to, that is a dynamic routing gateway which is a virtual router that provides a path for private network traffic between our VCN and our existing network. So I would create a dynamic route gateway as a DRG Mumbai in the JPEG data batch compartment. Then once the DRG is done, then we need to attach the dynamic routing gateway to our VCN. So that is my attachment name. This is a VCN name. Optionally, if we require a DR or replication for our managed data service, then we should configure the RPC. Otherwise, it is not necessary. That is a remote peering connection. If DR are not created, we can ignore this step. However, I have another use case to demonstrate cross-region MDS DR replication. For that use case, I need a remote peering connection. By keeping in mind, let us create a RPC now. As I said earlier, for the second use case, the cross-region DR replication, I'm going to use the Hyderabad region as a DR region. For that, we need a remote peering connection at DR region. Hence, we are creating RPC in Hyderabad region. If DR not created, we can ignore this step. Now we need to update the route tables in private subnet. So I'm using 1.0.0 as a high piece. Any high piece can connect to the my MDS, and we need to provide the NAT gateway as a target type. If DR is required, then we can update the DRG and DR IP in destination. Otherwise, we can ignore the second row. Now we configure the ingress rules with IPs and ports. So 3306 and 33060, these two ports are required to access the MDS. These are the security list which need to be configured in the private subnet. Since our network configurations are completed, now we can start to deploy the managed data service. In Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, we have three options to create a MDS. Either we can select a standalone or high availability or heat wave. High availability DB system is made up of a 3 MySql instance, a primary and 2 secondary. All data written to the primary instance is also written to the secondaries, that is replicated. A high availability DB system guarantees if one instance fails, another takeovers with zero data loss and minimal downtime. And about the heat wave, this is a distributed, scalable, and shared nothing. What is a shared nothing architecture, in memory, and hybrid columnar. And we have a lot of features like a query process engine is designed for extreme performance. Heatwave has a lot of advantages like in-memory query accelerator with built-in machine learning, which has a drastic high performance server. So for this demo, we don't require high performance or high availability system. So let us select the standalone system. Now we need to select the VCN which we created earlier and the subnet which recently created. So normally by default, it goes to the private subnet. And we need to select the availability domain. I am selecting a Mumbai region and not choosing any fault domain. And we need to select the shape for the hardware. I choose let us choose 1 CP count and 8 GB RAM. And the 50 GB as a data storage size. Once we proceed to create the MDS script in few minutes. So these are the port number and there's a IP, the private endpoints, and there's a region name. Because since MDS, that is managed data service for MySql, accessible through only private endpoint, we need a client machine. So I deployed the one compute VM instance in the same region, in the same subnet to access the MDS. This client machine, which acts as a jump server to connect the MDS. So we let us deploy the MySql shell, that is using yum install, and associate RPMs in the client machine. Now let us test the connections from the compute VM to MDS server. I'm just trying to test the connection using MySql shell using admin user with the private endpoint. So session is connected, and I'm creating one sample database as a demo DB. Optionally, we can deploy the MySql workbench. The MySql workbench provides a visual console like some easily administered to MySql environments and gain better visibility to the database. So the developers or the DBS can use the visual tools for configuring the servers and administrating users, performing backup and recovery, and inspecting audit data and viewing the database health. So MySql Workbench is a user-friendly tool used to manage MySql database. And point two is that as a prerequisite, we should have a private key file in OpenSSH format to connect the compute instance. I use a puttigen to convert my Windows private putty key to convert to OpenSSH key. Once the MySql Workbench is installation completed, we need to configure the connection parameters. So provide a jump server IP with the port, and this is the MySql host name. And we need to provide the credentials like admin and the password. The password is stored in the vault. And we can provide the default schema as a demo DB, which we created in MySql, like in an MDS database. Once it is done, the database is visible in GUI, where the tables is already created, what the tables, something department to and M tables are created in demo DB. So those tables are visible here. This is a snapshot of the MySql workbench. Yeah. So the in the next video session, let us discuss about how to configure the cross-region MySql DR replication. Thank you very much for your time for watching this video. Thanks a lot. Bye.